Today we're going to talk about preschool age development, and that's really, for me, ages 3 to 6 years old. So starting kind of what we consider stereotypical preschool and going till kind of the advent of kindergarten or more traditional elementary school age. We'll be looking at the development in all domains for children ages 3 to 6, and we'll look at the pre-seed proceed model with 2 specific studies for this age. Physical development, I want to touch real fast on growth for children ages 3 to 6, continuing with that adequate sleep, making sure that they get enough sleep, especially if they stop their nap. So they should be getting 10 to 12 hours at night, and then possibly a nap during the day as well, but some children stop napping quite early. There are sleep issues with this age. Night terrors, which is kind of when people are not aware that they're having a bad dream, and it's difficult to wake them up from it. Sleepwalking and sleep talking can be common, and then bedwetting. A lot of times this is like from anxiety or things like this, that children will have bedwetting issues. By 3, they should be fully potty trained most likely. It's probably not a developmental regression where they're bedwetting out of just working through the actual physical mechanics of it. Would be a regression more in the developmental scheme, most likely with like anxiety issues or social and emotional things that they're working through. Children should be going to the dentist starting at age 1.5, but we definitely put a priority on it at this age, and I started as a preschool teacher when I was 19. So this is an age that's near and dear to my heart, and I've always had dental screenings, vision screenings, and hearing screenings in all of the preschools that I've ever worked at. A lot of places like North County Health Services here in the North County area do free screenings at almost all of the public schools and any kind of state-funded preschool as well, because we just want to make sure that children have really good dental health, because that's part of our kind of overall health and well-being. For me, I started when my daughters were 1.5 because I had Kaiser Permanente, and they are very into preventative care. So they started hounding me when my daughter was like 9.5 months, 10 months, that I needed to start taking them to the dentist. So then by the time they were 1.5, I'd actually got my stuff together and I had found a dentist for them. And I'm really lucky that I lucked out in a referral, but I found this like amazing, super fun, so crazy kid-focused dentistry place in the North County area. It's like balloons and toys and princesses on the wall and a giant octopus that shoots little toys out of it. I mean, it's crazy. But I love it because it introduces the idea of dentistry and somebody putting their fingers in their mouth as fun and not anxiety producing. Because probably, if I'm talking about this right now, 50% of you are kind of freaked out right now because dentists have a really bad connotation of pain and just being uncomfortable. So I want my children to associate it with fun as much as possible. And at this age, they might start losing their baby teeth and replacing them with adult. So anywhere between like ages 5 to 7, you'll most likely be losing your first baby teeth and replacing them with adult, and that's why regular dentist checkups this early and getting the parents hooked in with places that can help them with paying for it is really important, so we can make sure that those adult series of teeth are coming in really healthy and they won't have issues with cavities or dental caries or anything like that. Nutrition, the funny thing about this age is that physical growth is slowing down. So infants, newborns, and toddlers are marked by this period of tremendous physical growth. You're going from a newborn who can't do anything to a toddler who's running, jumping, and saying no. So physical growth is slowing, so they actually need less calories, and we should really be focusing on increasing outdoor play and then giving them really quality vegetable and fruit choices. Those are the things that our picky toddlers probably were not focused on, so it's good that you're continuing to reintroduce really healthy choices for children while also prioritizing outdoor play so they can start out on those healthy habits of movement and a very nutritious diet very young. I also bring up nutrition because I update these slides, or I try to every year, to make sure that my the information I'm getting is the most up to date with what I know that I can provide. I know I hated it when I was a student and somebody like lectured from the same information from 20 or 30 years ago. But this is what I found for 2017 in San Diego County. This comes from a food group that I'm totally blanking on the name on, but 397,000 people. So almost 400,000 people in San Diego County are considered food insecure. So that's 12% of our total population. 137,000 are children, so under the age of 18, who are also food insecure. And food insecure kind of means where you don't know where your next meal is coming from. You're not suffering from malnutrition, or you're not actively starving, but the sources of having a good diet can be difficult for you to come by. Many of these children are eligible to receive breakfast and lunch at their preschool, especially if it's state funded and especially if it uses the USDA's food program, and then their elementary school as well. The elementary school meals need to be balanced, and they typically have appropriate serving sizes for each age group. I know that public school meals are an issue with nutrition. We'll talk about that when we talk about children going to school. But I do like that they're sitting down as a group or a family in elementary school. They're typically sitting at little tables, and they have their own food and they're having pleasant conversations. I like in preschool that we really focus on serving themselves and having conversations as well. But I think that's a big part of meal times that people often forget at this age, is just the idea of dining and dining with other people, and that being part of your social and emotional health as well. But food insecurity is something that I've worked with before in my job with children with special needs. I go into people's homes, so I get kind of an intimate look at how people live. And so about once or twice a year, I kind of have to have the conversation with, hey, Mom, you know, I noticed that there's not always a lot of food in the house, or are you giving your kids your meal and you're not eating yourself? I can help you, and I know places where I can get you food. There's pantries around, there's services that can help you, or I can help you fill out the paperwork, or I can have a Spanish speaker help you fill out the paperwork so that you can get free or reduced lunches for your elementary school students, you know, stuff like that. So I do try to offer really proactive solutions for my families when I kind of notice that food might be an issue in their home. I do want to talk about the pre-seed, proceed model and food insecurity costs. So there's SNAP, which is basically food stamps, and it's how low-income individuals and families also get food. It's kind of similar to WIC, women, infant, and children, but the SNAP thing right now, there are proposals to be changing it, but right now SNAP is the primary way that low-income families are able to access nutrition services. So we want to improve the efficiency of SNAP, and we also want to make sure that the food that SNAP is offering is of the highest, most nutrient-dense quality. Food costs is a really big issue because that kind of leads to people eating unhealthy. It's kind of the idea of when you talk to people who are struggling with their income, is you could choose a $1,600 calorie meal at McDonald's. It's going to keep you full for longer, and it's going to be cheaper than going and getting the same amount of the same food costs of like a salad, but that might only keep you full and satisfied for 2 to 3 hours. So typically a lot of people will choose more processed foods and fast foods. Not only is it easier, it's cheap, it can often be cheaper or the same cost as the healthier foods, and it's going to keep you sated and full much longer. But we also know that eating unhealthy foods can be associated with some poor health incomes as well. Food costs also fluctuates because of crop productivity, so you're probably paying a lot more for like blackberries in January because it's not, you know, the season for a crop. We're really lucky in Southern California. We have beautiful weather all year long, and so many of us who have grown up in this area are really not aware of how the seasonal crops play out in the rest of the country. But I spent some time back east. I lived there as a child and then for part of my college career, and you could definitely see how getting a tomato in February is like $5 for a tomato. It's just out of control. So that also plays into it as well. So these are a bunch of issues that are facing people who use SNAP benefits, so food stamp benefits. So what this pre-seed proceed model was looking at 4 Kentucky counties with varying rates of poverty and then access to healthy food. So Kentucky, Louisville, and some Lexington and places like that. My family's from that area. So those are actually quite small towns compared to like San Diego, Sacramento, San Francisco. So even the bigger cities in Kentucky are kind of smaller than what we're used to. It's really still quite a rural area. So how did they use the pre-seed proceed model in order to look at SNAP benefits and how they can, as their outcome, how they can impact people's food stamp benefits, and then also emphasize healthy eating. So they use the educational ecological assessment phase of the pre-seed proceed model to look at identifying factors that impede the healthy eating in rural Appalachia. And Appalachia is also considered a food desert as well because of its rural nature and kind of the township nature of kind of these places where you have small towns that might be isolated from other parts or isolated off of the highway. And my mother grew up in a town very similar to this. Its kind of main thoroughfare was still a river. So there was still in the 50s and 60s when she was growing up there, they still kind of used the rivers to import some of their food. So it was about an hour and a half out of kind of the bigger town. So they had real difficulty in the winter getting fresh produce and things like that. And that's also when the gardens and the subsistence farming that they were doing was out of season as well. So she has very vivid memories that she's kind of imparted on me of canning. So that's kind of a hipster thing now, like people want to can and pickle things and make kombucha and stuff like her, but she has very negative connotations with that because, you know, she would spend August and maybe July and September as well, the hottest months of the year, taking all the produce that they could find and grow and can it in order to use it during the winter. Hipsters might be doing it, but really poor people are probably not doing that. And so that kind of makes it a food desert in that case. So they're often purchasing canned or really highly processed versions of healthy foods. So canned foods that are high in salt and sodium or fat or even sugar, like the fruit sugar packs are really highly processed, like the mandarin oranges have a lot of sugar in them. So what they were kind of looking at, or factors that they were looking at, were community gardens in the months that you can, farmers markets, because even in the winter you can grow some hard weather crops like broccoli or bok chow, that's probably more out here. And then corner stores, which are the cornerstones of these small townships and towns, are like convenience type stores that are often family run. And so getting those types of places to also offer like bananas and apples in addition to like Twix bars and soda as well. And then just kind of increasing access to healthy foods through those ways. These strategies did have mixed results, they say in their conclusion. They did not really address the disparities in food costs that these people were experiencing living in rural areas. So by the end of the study, that they had kind of seen that they were improving dietary habits in this area, they need to look at both the economic aspects and the cultural aspects of the traditional diet. So that's why I like this pre-seed proceed model, is that it looks at the educational and ecological assessments. So they were really looking at their outcomes as kind of importing strategies that would probably seem like it would work in Southern California. Community gardens, farmers markets, because we have sunshine all the time. But in Appalachia and in Kentucky, you don't. It gets really, really cold. It doesn't snow all the time, but you definitely get frost, and you don't have times when you can grow things. So they need to look at the cultural aspects as well of what people eat, how they grow it, and how they get it. And then economically as well, if this is a food desert, how can we bring in healthier choices for people? So I like this pre-seed proceed model because it does kind of show us ways that we can flip our thinking in order to better meet the strategies and factors that are actually impacting the communities that we're looking to study. So it's going to more honestly show us those factors and highlight when we are bringing in our own stereotypical strategies. I want to talk about safety as well. So under the age of 8, you need to be in a car seat or a booster seat until they're 8 or they're almost 5 feet tall. And I do bring this up because it's actually the leading cause of death is drowning at this age, then traffic accidents, which being buckled up securely is very important, fires, and then homicide. So those are the leading causes of death for ages 3 to 6, which is kind of really upsetting. Drowning, having children that I've been trying to teach how to swim, I can see how easily it happens. Traffic, fire, and homicide, but all of those are preventable deaths. And I think that's what's so unfortunate for these children, is that it is things that as a community and as parents as well, if we are safe with our children and we take some precautions, we could lower those numbers. I do want to talk about accessing healthcare. The last time I talked about this was kind of in the pregnancy, but for preschool age children, so ages kind of 3 to 6, 1 in 5 Latino, 1 in 8 African American, and 1 in 13 Caucasian children are uninsured. And that is a huge disparity in racial ability to access healthcare. And that's a shame that so many of our children, depending on the race or the culture that they have, that they are not having the same access to healthcare that they should. There are 9 million uninsured children in the United States, and this is 2018. Those numbers are going to fluctuate a lot. Healthcare is very in flux right now. We're not sure what the next steps are. We don't know about programs like CHIP. The Children's Health Insurance Program is dangerously underfunded in California and many states around the country. So it's definitely an issue right now that's affecting our families and affecting people's kind of feeling like they can't access healthcare, and I think that's a real shame. Children without health insurance are more than 14 times as likely to lack a source of health care. Obviously, if you don't have health insurance, you're not going to go to things that are more optional, like child checkups, regular doctor's appointments, or immunizations. And that's really a shame as well, is because I've kind of harped on this over the last kind of slides, but that is where a lot of developmental milestones are identified. So if a child is missing some milestones, those child checkups are where those issues will be identified and then offered services to. So if Latino and African American children are not going to these appointments, then there's a lot of chance that they will be missing out on getting available services that they could have started much younger. They're then going to be getting those services when they go into elementary school, and some of those delays are identified very late. And that's also going to impact the ability that they can kind of catch up with their peers. We know that the first 5 years is a time of huge brain development. So the earlier our social services start, then the earlier we can start programs that will help them and help them catch up and make them help them make those brain connections so that they can kind of reach their full developmental potential. So it is really important that when we're talking about childcare, children, we're talking about accessing healthcare as well and making it as equal as possible for all children. I've been doing this the last couple of lectures as well. So our 3-year-olds should definitely be running. They should be being able to go around a couch or any kind of obstacle in their path. They should jump both feet off the ground, 1 foot up, so 1 foot up, 1 foot down, like if you're doing hopscotch. Climbing the stairs or climbing monkey bars or ladders like the little girl on the top right is, alternating feet and climbing ladders in jungle gyms. And then by 3 years old, they should have a prominent hand that they use, left hand or right hand, or be identified as using both. But for most people, they should have a prominent hand that they use. Being able to scribble, make very rough stick figures like this little girl is doing as well. At 4 years old, you should be able to run and then stop and start and turn very sharply, hop on 1 foot while jumping, so playing hopscotch, jump in a row, bead bracelets, and cut paper, so cut a piece of paper through, and then bead bracelets like the little girl on the left hand is. They should be like the size of a Cheerio with something like floss. So that's quite sophisticated, considering what a 2-year-old could do would be like a very large block with a very large piece of string. It's gotten a lot more sophisticated. They should be able to run as well on sand, like the little boy in the bottom right-hand picture is doing. Running on sand, grass, wood chips, things like that. So uneven surfaces, they can hold their balance while running. 5- and 6-year-olds, they're starting to learn how to ride bikes. And the biggest thing for me is introducing swimming and swim safety rules. This is definitely something that parks and recreation departments across the country have identified as a skill that children need to have. There's a pro football player who almost died as a child, and so he started a foundation to encourage African-American children, but just kind of children of all races who maybe won't have the opportunity to get into the pool to take swim lessons, because it is a skill. And living in Southern California, I think that the beach should have open access for everybody. Everybody should be able to enjoy it, and part of being able to enjoy it is being able to swim in it. So introducing swimming and then swim safety rules. Parks and recreation departments do have scholarships and sliding scale fees for families who do need their children to learn how to swim. The lessons can get costly, so reaching out to Parks and Recreation Department and asking them what they can do is the best way to go about getting lessons for somebody who needs help support with financial support. I'm going to jump into cognitive ability. So in our previous lectures, I talked about toddlers and how they're growing tremendously physically, but their kind of language ability and cognitive ability are not quite there, and that's why we get a lot of temper tantrums and social and emotional issues, is because they can't tell us or start to reason with us. The great thing about preschool is that they're engaging more in higher level cognitive functions, and they have more of a thought process. It is very much rooted and grounded in logic and concrete hands-on thought and exploration. So they're not doing anything really abstract at all at this age. It's very much rooted in what they can see, touch, hear, feel, and taste. So using their 5 senses to explore their world and kind of make thought processes around these things. So Jean Piaget and his pre-operational stage, we talked a bit about it last week because it starts at age 2, but it's the idea of having object permanence. So by 3, they should definitely have object permanence. And then they're also, at this age, they don't understand the conservation of liquid. So that's the very, very classic Piagetian experiment where there's 2 equal glasses of water, and he shows it to them, and the child can identify that that holds the same amount of liquid. He takes one and he pours it into something that's much lower and wider, and the child thinks that this one has more liquid. So that's a classic idea of how they don't, while their cognitive ability is changing and getting better and they have more ability to think logically, they don't understand that things remain so even if their appearance is altered. Another great thing about this is a rich fantasy life, and they use magical thinking. My first preschool class when I was 19 years old, we did a whole unit on butterflies. And I remember asking a little boy, what do butterflies eat? And he said pigs. And he told me, that the butterflies get huge and then they devour the pig and then they get real small again. That's just an example of like how wonderfully complex their imagination is, and how they kind of think through these things of, well, I don't know what a butterfly eats. I like to eat pig. I bet a butterfly likes to eat pig. I mean, I don't know what was going on in his head, but they have a very rich fantasy life and magical thinking. And now their language ability has caught up with these things that they're able to think, and they're able to let us into what they are thinking in their mind. Also in the pre-operational stage, and this is the image on the top left-hand side, there's the little boy, there's a bunch of different mountains, and there's a doll. This is also a egocentric experiment that Piaget and others have done where the child can only describe the mountains from his perspective and not from the doll's perspective. So he could just say it goes up, and then it goes down, and then it goes down. But if you were to ask him, what does the doll see, he wouldn't be able to say up and then higher and then higher. He can only tell us from his perspective what he sees. And that's why we know that children at this age are still egocentric. They only can look at concrete experiences through their own eyes, but also emotional experiences as well. While they know that other people have emotions, they really can't empathize deeply with what other people are thinking. And that is just very typical until they're about 7, that they're more concerned about themselves and their emotions, which can make 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, and 5-year-olds still a little bit difficult because they don't understand or they can't quite fully empathize when somebody else is sad because I've hit you. They don't have that full range of being able to think about it yet. Then Lev Vygotsky, and his biggest work when we're looking at preschool children is the zone of proximal development. So this is how we assist children in their development. A lot of times it's in classrooms, and preschool classrooms of any kind are built on this idea of the thing that you can do, the thing that you can do with some help, and then the things that you can't do no matter how much support I give you. And we want to be in that middle area, that half shaded area with things that you can do with a bit of help. So how can I support you and scaffold you so that you can get on to the next stage in your development? So we're not giving you no help, and we're not giving you all the help. We're giving you just the right amount of help so that you can work through it on your own. So educational models, especially if they are hands-on, are built on kind of this idea, but most parents as well, even if they don't know about Vygotsky, they know about coaching their children or supporting them through difficult things like riding a bike. You know, most parents just don't throw them on a bike and let them go. You know, you run behind them, you let go, you do it on the grass so they can fall down, you have a helmet on. There's a lot of different ways that we support children learning how to ride a bike, because at the very beginning, that's something that they couldn't do. And through support, we get them through each step in order to be able to ride their bike at this stage. So scaffolding is a way to support children. So that's in the zone of proximal development, we help them through scaffolding. So think of a scaffold on a building. In order to get workers and builders up and up and up, we make these scaffolds along the building so that you can get to each kind of platform. So that's the same thing. If the top of the building is the child's utmost development, then the scaffold is there so that we can support them get to the top of their developmental ability. So we want to keep them interested in the task. So oftentimes a lot of preschools are project-based. They're built on things that children have shown an interest in already, because that motivates them to stay interested in the topic and continue to work on it. Breaking the task down into manageable steps, like with my bike riding analogy, we take steps as we get along. We wouldn't just put a child on a two-wheel bike. That's why we have training wheels and grass and helmets and things like that, in order to get to the ultimate goal of riding a bike without training wheels. We often need to provide some direction to keep the child focused, so like next steps or things like that. When my daughter, she was drawing a picture the other day, and she was getting really upset because she couldn't draw the headphones that she wanted to go in the little girl's ears on this drawing. And so I kind of provided some direction. I pulled up a picture on my iPad of like what somebody looks like with headphones on. Are they going to be the big ones? Are they earbuds? You know, that type of stuff, to keep her focused on what the task was, because she was drawing a picture of what she thinks she's going to look like when she's a teenager. She's 6 years old. So in 10 years, this is what I have to look forward to, is somebody wearing headphones. So by providing her pictures of it, I was able to give her some directions so that she could stay focused on this drawing of herself. Reduce factors that cause frustration, and this is a lot of times with children with special needs. If the classroom is too loud, if it's too distracting, if they have ADHD, those types of things. What can we do to reduce factors that cause frustration? So in more progressive schools, you'll see that they have those exercise balls that children can bounce on, because that type of repetitive behavior that children can engage in can be helpful for children with ADHD. And then sometimes also it's called self-stimming. Children with autism can do it as well. So we're setting up a classroom, or setting up an environment so that children of all learning abilities have the most ability to be successful and not frustrated. And then also in classrooms as well, we model it. So when I do something, I try to model what my expectations are with the activity. That's why in this class, the first week, and in most university classes, the first week is the syllabus, all the course requirements. I walk you through the class so that I model and define for you what you need to do. This is your policy paper. This is the article reflections. This is your midterm. This is your final. So that you are walking away after the first week knowing what my expectations are for you and all of your assignments, so that we can just focus on learning the material. The language development is fantastic at this age. The sentence length is getting much longer. So instead of a toddler, I do that, or want that, or something like that, I need that, can I have that please? And the best thing about this is that they are using pragmatics. And I love pragmatics, and I love pragmatics with very young children, because it's basically learning how to manipulate people within language. So they are understanding that language is a way to communicate, and that there's a social context behind it. But mostly at this age, it's learning to be polite in order to get what they want. So if your mom was on the phone, and you were 4 or 5 years old, you've probably learned that interrupting mommy on the phone doesn't get you the cookie. But if you were to wait until afterwards and say, Mama, you look so beautiful today, can I have a cookie? Then you might have a really good chance of getting a cookie. You were polite, you offered a compliment, and you said it in a really nice tone of voice when mommy wasn't distracted. So I have seen children use this from a very young age, that they understand that there's a social context, and if they are polite and respectful and offer compliments, then they can often get what they want by using and manipulating communication. So that's why I love pragmatics at this age. There's a lot more behind it, but this is just kind of the brief overview of how children use language at this area. You should encourage grammar and syntax and using more elaborate vocabulary by exposing children to it. So using words instead of big, it's ginormous. Instead of tiny, it's minuscule. Giving them enough exposure to larger vocabulary words and more complex syntax and grammar will help them add to their body of understanding about language development. But if they make a mistake, which they will, especially in our young threes, they'll say, Mama, I did it. Then you'll be like, wow, honey, you did it. Just to model that I did it, is not, the proper form for that verb. And you can just model how you use it instead of being like, no, it's I did it, honey. You just kind of model it really informally while you're talking with the child, and they will start to eventually pick up on that. So early childhood education, sometimes I get this question from people who already are parents or are wanting to become parents. What should you look for if you want to put your child in preschool? It should be developmentally appropriate and should follow state licensing requirements. And that's really all that I look for. The type of program that you choose is really up to you and what your needs are for your family. There are Montessori, Waldorf, Reggio Emilia, play-based, project-based, academic, all this type of stuff. It should be developmentally appropriate. So if you're putting a 3-year-old in, they know what 3-year-olds do. They know how 3-year-olds act. They know that 3-year-olds hit. They know that 3-year-olds do this and that. And they expect them to do that. And so they've built their classroom around that. So teachers don't expect them to use, like you wouldn't have a 3-year-old classroom and the teachers would expect them to be these super empathetic creatures that are never going to hit anybody. Because that's what happens in classrooms, is that they're not. They're completely egocentric until they're 7. The teachers need to understand that because they've taken classes like this and they've learned from people like me. And so that they have built their classroom around the idea of sharing and teaching children how to share and how to talk and how to work together to solve problems. Licensing, it's called community care licensing. It's from the state of California. And what it is it covers how healthy and safe a program is for children. A lot of it is supervision, ratios. You can have 4 infants for every 1 teacher, things like that. But really, it's a safety and health program. It can be difficult to work with licensing. There are lots and lots and lots of licensing standards. I think the licensing standard book is like 400 pages. I teach a class that does licensing standards at Palomar, so I know a lot of licensing standards and I know how hard it can be to work in it, but it is really important because at the end of the day, it identifies the programs that are not high quality and are not good for children, and it shuts them down or makes them be better. And that's really all I care about at the end of the day, is that the majority of the children in our community if they are going to school, they are going to a good school. The only thing that I would tell people who are looking for preschool is to ask lots and lots of questions. And that would be, what's the discipline policy? Can I be involved? Can I talk to other parents? Can I observe a classroom? How do you tell me about my child's day, especially for an infant toddler? How will I know how much they've eaten, how much they've drunk? When did they take a nap? That type of stuff. How do you deal with separation anxiety? Things like that. So you don't feel that you can't ask 50 questions. You can ask 100 questions. I've done a million director tours of schools that I've worked at, and I'm always happy if we've set up a tour to answer your questions so that you feel really, really good about leaving your child with me. It's your child. You are entrusting me with their health and safety. It's a very important role, something I take seriously, and I want you to feel confident about the program you're putting your child in. So I want to talk about pre-K and TK and kinder because it is kind of changing, and that's why I've generally kept this to age 6, is because we have pre-K programs now which are like a lot of schools have state-funded programs within them. So these are things like Head Start, or just in general, just state-funded programs that identify children that are 3, 4, and 5 who are able to go to this preschool to work on their readiness for kindergarten skills, which is the image on the left-hand side. Then we have TK, which is transitional kindergarten, and transitional kindergarten is a free kind of Kinder 1 program that the school districts offer for children who are born between September and December who would otherwise miss out on kindergarten for that calendar year. So now in the state of California, you have to be 5 before September 1st in order to go to kindergarten. My twins were born on September 18th, so this year they're in kindergarten, so they were 5 for 3 weeks, and then they turned 6. In TK, they were 4 for 3 weeks, and then they turned 5. So it's 4 children like that who are just on the cusp, who would otherwise be missing that year, who get a transitional kindergarten year through the elementary school districts. It's a great program. Most schools only have 1 to 2 classrooms, which only means that at the top, like 30 students, 35 students are being offered this service. At my school, there was only 1 classroom, and I think they topped out enrollment at like 17 or 18 kids. So it's not a huge program that has this tremendous scope of children that they're serving, but I do think it is a great program. There's also part-day or full-day kinder, depending on the school and the site as well. Right now, we follow Common Core standards for education, and we'll go more into this, but it's a Department of Education framework, and we'll go more into it, but some states have chosen to do it and some states have not. For example, Alaska and Texas don't follow Common Core standards, and California does. In the last 5 years, this has changed how we look at education and how we are trying to teach children. I'll talk about it more in the school age parts of my lecture because it definitely has more of an implication, the higher level thinking, like 3rd and 4th graders, and how it's changed math and English and things like that. Kindergarten is very similar to what you probably remember. Kindergarten, though, they don't nap in the classrooms anymore, but they still have pets. They still have recess a lot. They still learn by playing. They still have the cooking area and things like that. Because we know and we understand that children still need to play to a certain extent in kindergarten because children learn by play. Like Maria Montessori said, play is the work of the child. That's my thing. I love that. It's probably like the biggest quote when I'm working with children is that children need to play. And it is definitely the work of the child. And that's why in Montessori's, they don't call it play, they actually call it work. They'll say, get your work out and things like that, because they've identified the work that they do as so important that they want to elevate it to a kind of a higher platform in our minds, so they call it work. Social and emotional development, kind of the sense of self that's being developed at this age, and we're also developing our gender development as well. So we're going to be looking at self-definition and self-esteem. I don't have a handout, sorry, that was from one of my lecture courses. But self-definition is how we describe ourselves. So I would talk about myself. I'm a community college and university instructor. I'm a mom. I'm middle-aged. I live in Oceanside, you know, that type of stuff. In early childhood, it's very positive and it's very concrete. I'm 4, I'm nice, I have a mama and a daddy and a dog. And then by the time they're 7, 6, 7, 8, it's a little bit more critical. So like, hi, I'm 7, I'm nice to some people, but sometimes I'm mean, and I'm really bad at math, and I love to play soccer, and you know, stuff like that. So it's kind of how we see ourselves and how we describe ourselves to other people. Then self-esteem is how we determine or measure our self-worth. And this has been an area that we've had a lot more study in because we've kind of noticed that we don't want to focus on the wrong things when we are encouraging children. So we want to focus on the characteristic and the effort of the child and not things that they don't have control over. So you wouldn't say, oh, honey, you're so smart. You would say, I really like how hard you worked. You practiced your spelling words over and over all week. You got an A. You worked so hard. I'm so proud of you, honey. So it's not just you're smart, you got an A. It's you worked hard and you got an A. So we're prioritizing the hard work and the things that the child could change. So we wouldn't also say, you're so pretty, you're so handsome, because that's not something that we really have a lot of control over, and it's not something we want to focus on the characteristics that they can change within themselves to make themselves better. The interesting things though is that ages 5, 6, and 7, they often overrate their ability, so that they'll say like they're the best player on the soccer team or something like that. But we'll kind of allow that, and we'll just keep focusing on the characteristic and the hard work, or the empathy, or the kindness, or the characteristics that we want to see in their self-esteem, and not just that they're smart or pretty or, you know, things like that. How do we also work on emotional regulation? This has to go in with self-esteem as well. Is having a good sense of yourself also has to do with your ability to regulate yourself. And it can be really, really difficult. So for our preschoolers, they're learning to resist temptation and give themselves instructions that keep themselves focused. So if you want a great example of this, I tried to link with it, but I don't know why my laptop won't do it, but it's the marshmallow experiment. So if you've never seen that, please YouTube it. It's hysterical. The gist of it is they put a child in a room that's fitting a video camera. They give them one marshmallow and they say that you can eat this now, or I'm going to come back in 2 minutes and you can have 2 marshmallows. And so what they have to do is they have to regulate themselves, and they have to use their patience in order to wait those 2 minutes to get 2 marshmallows. So you'll see a lot of times that they need to resist the temptation, but they'll give themselves instructions. Like literally in the experiment, you'll see them sitting on their hands or like telling themselves, like, you can do it, you can do it, you can wait 2 minutes, then you'll get a second one. Like they have to walk through the steps of how they're going to do this. And this is how children this age mature. They're working through emotions, they're working through frustration, joy, anger, sadness, all of these things. They have to identify them. Then they have to understand how they can do it and what they're feeling and why they're feeling it. And then they have to regulate it. I don't know a lot of adults who can do that so successfully. I mean, that's why we have bar fights and assaults and all these types of things, because adults aren't the best at this, but we expect 3 and 4 and 5-year-olds to do this expertly. So I would say that we are a little bit understanding with children, and we help them through this. So you can be like, I know that you're feeling really upset right now. Your face is flushed, you're angry at your friend because you got hit with the shovel, and I'm so sorry that happened to you. What can we do to make you feel better? So kind of helping them identify what the emotion is and what some of the physical and emotional things are, so that they can identify when I'm flushed and angry, that is actual frustration or anger or whatever it is, and how can I kind of regulate it. And that's why quality preschool teachers or teachers of any kind of age have been trained that social and emotional development is just as much and just as important as cognitive development, so that they can help them kind of stay focused and regulate their emotions, because it's a really important thing that we all need, and some of us have probably not have it. I know that I snapped at my kids earlier today, and I was definitely not very regulated getting everybody out of the house, but tomorrow is a new day. So what can we do to promote self-regulation in early childhood? I know that everybody loves Elmo and Grover and things like that, but I think that Cookie Monster and Oscar the Grouch are the true creations of Sesame Street. They tap into that id that we all have, that me want cookie, and that grouchy side of us that we don't often get, especially children. They don't have that modeled for them, and I think that's why it's such an important character, is talking about gluttony and anger and things like that, that we often push down in our culture. And in Sesame Street, they say that these things exist and we can regulate it. So these are some ways that a child, that we can promote self-regulation in early childhood. Structure and routine, that's on the right-hand side. Very important. And knowing what is in my environment and what's going to happen next allows me to feel regulated throughout my day and feel like I can handle challenges when I know that I'm going to go home and I'm going to have dinner, and then I'm going to have a bath, and then I'm going to go to bed. Knowing what's going to happen next is really important for preschoolers. Also, along with modeling, like I was saying before, naming the behaviors that we have, or then me modeling really good, being polite. You can tell your children to use please and thank you, but they are going to learn how to be polite to people in a store by you modeling it for them. That's the biggest indicator of politeness. And then conversations at dinner time, or just when they're upset as well, talking openly and calmly about the feelings that they're having. And then how can we walk through these emotions, what's going to help you feel better, how can we resolve the differences that you're having with people. And then make-believe play as well is really important in the classroom and then at home as well. Just letting them take on the roles of a parent a younger sister, a dog, something like that, so they can act out different kinds of emotions in kind of a safe, play-based space. So also when we're talking about social emotional is Erik Erikson's third stage, which is initiative versus guilt. So that's ages 3 to 5, 5, 6. So what you should be doing is in your safe environment where you have routine and consistency, you are able to make safe choices and decisions so that you can kind of plan and carry out things. And if you can't do this, then you kind of feel guilty or inhibited about things. So this would be having choices or just being able to explore your environment, understand what you're doing, play make-believe, and then, like I said, with safe choices, like being able to go to the jungle gym and play on the monkey bars and things like that that are safe and that have kind of safety controls built into them, but the child can make decisions about how high they go or when they go, and they can work through those things on their own. They're not allowed to go out into the world and start to explore their own environment and environments around them. Then they will start to feel kind of guilty about things. So then gender, and when I'm talking about gender, this is gender identity for kind of cisgendered people. So the idea of transgendered or non-binary or things like that are kind of out of this discussion. It's definitely a topic that's very important, but it's not really something that we would identify in a 302 as something that we take. It would be better suited in a gender class where we would have enough time to go through the nuances of the gender in this area. I'm just bringing up gender because about age 2 is when children get to decide, or children are kind of understanding that they're a boy or girl, depending on our own society's ideas of gender. There are some gender differences that we have observed in children. So both sets of genders are aggressive and can be quite aggressive at 2, 3, 4. But girls engage in a relational or social aggression, teasing and ostracizing, and boys often engage in like direct aggression. So it's a physical and verbal direct aggression. So you're stupid, I don't like you, and girls are like that mean girl type stuff. So we've identified that even in the preschool age, this type of stuff is already happening. There's no differences in cognition. And then children's play can be different in middle and early childhood as well, but it definitely has ideas with our own society's ideas of gender as well. So, and that has to do with how the idea of children, how they are raised to, how we're talked to, how we're encouraged to play based on our gender, on our culture, and our time. It doesn't predict the future for this individual, though. Like, I've obviously got into the social services, social sciences, soft sciences, and education, whereas my sister, who's only 4.5 years younger than me, is a scientist, and she studies environmental science, is quite technical and things like that. And we were raised in the exact same way, and just depending on who we are, we went into vastly different fields. I don't even understand what she does. Honestly, it's got something to do with the environment and water. So what we can assume how an individual behaves as a childhood is what they are going to be in adulthood based on their gender. So you can't say this little girl, because she likes pink, she's going to be a fashion designer. She might like pink and she's going to end up being, you know, the president of Pepsi Cola. We can't really make those kind of decisions about people. So when we're looking at gender, though, I do have a kind of scenario that I like to go through, because we're going to be looking at gender through kind of different frameworks and see how it's kind of changed time-wise and framework-wise. So a 4-year-old boy pretends he's a girl while he's playing in the dramatic play area. He states that even though he is a boy, he can still be the mom. So some theoretical frameworks would be psychosexual, which is like Freud. So, you know, he definitely, in the old school, in the 1800s, phallic stage, you're developing an attraction to your opposite sex parent. And that's what Freud would say, is that he was, you know, entering the phallic stage and that he, you know, wanted to marry his mom. Our behaviorists would be gender and identity results from direct and indirect reinforcements of gender roles. So this would be like Skinner and Pavlov. So operant and classical conditioning. So when a boy or a girl does something, we give them direct or indirect reinforcements of gender roles. So indirect would be like a truck for a boy and a doll for a girl. And then direct would be like if a boy picked up a girl, you would say, no, you're a boy, you play with the truck. And then cognitive, a big one is Kohlberg, and he kind of went with children typically develop an understanding of gender constancy. So that means that you're going to remain the gender that you are. You understand that at about age 7, and you adjust your behavior. So you're not one day going to wake up and be a girl if you were a boy previously. You are most likely this gender. And then in social learning, Bucy and Bandura, they were kind of looking at peer models to observe gender behaviors. That was Bandura's big thing, and a lot of his work was on peer modeling, peer aggression, and things like that. So they are looking at their models to observe gender behaviors. So kind of what we think about gender has changed through time, for sure, with the feminist revolution of the 1960s and things like that. And now in the 2000s, understanding the idea of transgender, non-binary, things like that, that I'm starting to learn about as well. So we are learning about gender, and we're learning about sex and the things and how they are interrelated. And I'm sure by the time I'm done with my teaching career, hopefully in 20 or 30 years, we will have learned a lot more, and I can add more to this as we go along. But once we look at play, though, we really want to make sure that children are playing as much as possible. Like I said, play is the work of the child. Social play, independent play, dramatic play, formal games. That's something that our 5, 6, and 7-year-olds can get into. Organized games like Candyland, Sorry, Uno, things like that. Hopscotch, dodgeball, anything that's organized and that children have some control with. That goes back to Erickson's initiative versus guilt. They're kind of in control of these games, and they focus on how they play with other people. Those are really great types of games for children to engage in. I think the biggest thing is that children this age will show aggression. And it's usually instrumental aggression, either direct that boys are doing or the non-direct that girls are doing, but it's in order to achieve a goal. So it's not really that they're malicious or they just wanted to. It's, you know, you have my toy, I want it, I'm going to bash you on the head and then I get my toy back. That's typically what it is. So the more that we model pro-social behavior through these types of play throughout the day and then provide consequences, then that's going to help them learn and start to extinguish that aggression. I do want to go over these slides. So this is from Erica Lindwall, who's a master in public health. And it's from a lecture that she gave on promoting vaccinations in children using the pre-seed, proceed model. So I've changed them a little bit to kind of focus on what we need, focus on our community and how vaccinations are different here. But a lot of this is from her work because I really couldn't do any better. And I think that just gives us a really good example of what pre-seed, proceed is. So who's not getting vaccinated and why? Young adult parents are most likely to opt out of vaccinations. And then she was kind of thinking, what are the reasons why? So misinformation, there is a lot of like fake news that we're talking about, especially on Facebook, social media, like Instagram especially, and then YouTube videos is a dark hole. It's a dark place when it comes to vaccinations and chemtrails and a lot of these conspiracy theories. There's a lot of false literature circulating about a link between vaccines and autism or mercury in it or thimerosal or all these types of things that are no longer in vaccinations and haven't for like 17 or 18 years. And I think that is a real issue. A lot of them are very sickly produced, so like it's really tight, and especially on Instagram I've seen these things where you know, it has this image and then it's got text, and then in the bottom it'll have like a fake made up percentage that somebody's just made. But if you were just clicking through, that would be really, it would stand out to you. And if you're pregnant or you're thinking about being pregnant or you have a child, these types of things are going to play into your mind. And I think that's why they're so dangerous, is because they're easy to see and they're very false a lot of times. Then there's complacency. So a lot of times we don't understand because we haven't seen the medical cost of it. So one of my parents' friends had polio as a child. She survived. She became a nurse, but there is these secondary polio effects that you can have as an adult if you had polio as a child. She actually had to give up a thriving nursing career because basically her polio came back and she's really struggling to walk at this point. So for my parents' generation, they saw it. They got these huge vaccinations on their arm, and they saw people got really sick or passed away. We don't have that anymore. I mean, a little bit with hepatitis A, but it has been somewhat shielded with us. It's not something that we see homeless people dying in front of us. They just kind of disappear, unfortunately. So we really need to look at why people are not doing vaccinations. A lot of it can be religious and then these kind of holistic ideas. And then there's individualism as well. So this is a mandatory regulation from the state, and I don't like it because the state of California in 2016, you have to be vaccinated in order to go to childcare or elementary schools, and you have to get a doctor's signature. A lot of times people go to their osteopath or their chiropractor or something like that and get around it that way. But they should be letting us know why they are not getting it, and religious beliefs and these holistic beliefs shouldn't be one of them. So the pre-seed proceed model, and why she was looking at this is it's focusing on the community as the source for health promotion. So because healthy choices and making these choices are voluntary, the target population should be an active participant in the health promotion program. And then public health is a community issue and is influenced by community history, economics, politics, environment, and beliefs. And then health is not just a physical state, but a tool that helps individuals and communities to accomplish their goals and lives and live fulfilling lives. And I love this, and I took this from this master's in public health presentation that she had because I could not say this any better. It's voluntary. It has to do with where we live and in what time we live. And then it's a physical state as well. So I also like this as well because she did this. So this is her promotion proposal. So this intervention is a 5-year-long program looking at new or expectant parents and then the parents of young children. And so the first part is the pre-seed phase. So defining the goal, prioritizing, identifying risk behaviors, and identifying current policies. So phase 1, the ultimate goal of this program is to increase the knowledge of young parents about the importance of vaccines, so replacing false information, opportunities for them to immunize their children. Measurable goal is that by 2020, 90% of children ages 0 to 6 will be vaccinated according to the guidelines set by the CDC, because that's also very in vogue right now, is to get your child vaccinated, but to do it on this completely arbitrary schedule that you've made up. And sometimes this makes me a little bit angry because the CDC is the brainiest folk in the country. They have doctorates on top of their PhDs. They've done this in a scientific way, and you've just said, I think it's too much. And that's where we need to kind of counter this misinformation about vaccinations. And then phase 2 and 3 would be health barriers. So false information that leads to the fear of vaccines, the cost of vaccines, and then the complacency about the dangers of being unvaccinated. I don't really like the word ignorance, but kind of the complacency. So not having witnessed what unvaccination means as a community, as in a whole, and as a society, we don't understand it, and it doesn't have as much meaning, and we're not going to engage in the health behaviors if we don't see why we should. And then phase 4, she identifies that the policies are already in place. So California already has a state law that you need to be vaccinated, and so that's not something that we would really have to work with. And then phase 5, so this is kind of past looking at educational interventions, so interacting with new families, providing families with information, distributing pamphlets and information about the recommended vaccines are all really fantastic ways to do it. And then public health workers, nurses, and things like that, or public health nurses are really important, definitely front lines with some at-risk families that I've worked with. Enforcing mandatory vaccines, and this would be in preschool as well. And then raising funds to help with the cost barrier. So if people are having a hard time paying for vaccinations, making sure that it's something that they can get within their health care. And then posters and advertisements about the value of vaccines and the danger of not vaccinating children. So this is great. I love this thing that she made. I think that she did a fantastic job with explaining the importance of vaccination, and then really clearly outlining the pre-seed proceed model as well. I will link with this and then also the pre-seed proceed model about Appalachian food insecurity in this week's lesson as well. So if this was something for your policy paper that you were interested in, either food or vaccination, then this might be a starting off point for research or something that you could use for the case study part of your policy paper. Thanks so much and have a great week.